All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here. We're doing our best bets for Week 7 in college football, looking at how we fared last week. Another winning weekend in the books, going 3-2. The A&M Mississippi State full game over did not cash because they turned that one into a defensive affair for some reason in the first half. We went against Florida State. Miami covered that one relatively easily. Nick took Penn State to cover, and they lost the game. Pretty hilarious, because of course they did. Memphis easily covered. That was another one of Nick's picks, so he redeemed himself. Then TCU had the most amazing backdoor cover. 20 seconds ago, fourth down, they score a touchdown to win by 14. And Nick would like to make an announcement about that Penn State selections before we get started.
Yeah, I want to apologize to everyone. I led wrong by saying that Penn State was going to boat race UCLA. James Franklin has found new ways to disappoint me and blow away my even low expectations. I don't understand how that even happened. That is a complete disaster. One of the worst losses, if not the worst loss in Penn State football history. A complete and unmitigated disaster for James Franklin. He may find himself out of a job come the end of the season. Shout out to the UCLA, everyone at UCLA, including the offensive coordinator who had an incredible showing in his first game ever calling plays. He was an offensive coordinator for 3 days. That's just a once in a lifetime weird bounce. That's not going to happen again. That was just a crazy bounce that went the wrong way. Penn State are clearly a fraudulent team, and they are in a bad spot the rest of the season. A bad misread by me, but that is not going to happen again. That's my mulligan. Crazy that happened. For the greater good that UCLA won, because I think it will change some things, and things will be very interesting because of that. But a bad loss for me, and I certainly won't forget that one. A misread on my part.
Now we're going to go ahead and dive into these picks for Week 7, getting things started. For the third week in a row, I'm going against Florida State. They're getting 10.5 against Pittsburgh, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. For Pitt, Mason Heinschel, the true freshman three-star quarterback, got the start. He put on a show. He had 4 touchdowns, 323 yards, and a 48-7 thumping of Boston College. They were only favored by about a touchdown in that game, and they put on an absolute clinic on offense, benching Eli Holstein in the process. This is a group that still has a tremendous amount of pass catchers. Poppy Williams, Kenny Johnson, Katarius Hicks. You also some other guys at tight end like Justin Holmes stepping up. It's a deep group, right? I'm not sure what the availability of Des Reed will be. I haven't even looked into that, so I'll get an update on that. But this is a team that still was able to run the ball for a $172 against BC. And the reason I keep betting against Florida State is because I feel like this team, after beating Alabama, was getting significant amounts of hype. And I was like, I just don't think they really proved a whole lot by winning in Week 1 over a team in Alabama that was trying to figure out a lot of things, right? Breaking in a new quarterback, trying to get their defense up to par against this style of offense. And they just had a good showing, right? In Alabama, with their recent momentum, Nick, I think is overinflated Florida State in the process, and it's still lingering for some reason. That's why I picked Miami to cover with ease. They were blowing them out. Tried to make things interesting late, but they still covered at the end of the day. And I think Pittsburgh here, they're going to be able to cover this. I think they have a good enough offense against the defense I just don't think is all that impressive. It's a team that continues to struggle through the air. They struggled big time against Virginia. I guess they stood up well against Miami, but Miami was more willing to throw the football. And then late in that game, they were really just trying to drain clock, running downhill. They weren't really using many variations to try and get that run game that's incredibly physical going. So I think Florida State, this is a defense that's not all that great. Against Boston College, they couldn't generate much pressure at all. This is a team who doesn't have much of a pass rush in Florida State. It's been very inconsistent. So I think Pittsburgh, they're going to have plenty of clean pockets. I think when it comes to defending the FSU run game, obviously that's tough, right? That's the one thing they're exceptionally well at. This is a run defensive Pitt, though, that's been elite this year. Sure, they've maybe played some weaker opponents, but Louisville has a great rushing attack, 53 yards there. And then West Virginia, I know they're not the greatest of opponent, and they ended up losing that game. But they held them to 174, almost 60 carries in the game that went to overtime. So they've proven they have plenty of bodies. They have plenty of playmakers at linebacker like Rasheem Biles and Kyle Lewis. Tommy Solanos, he's obviously a very good playmaker. In the past game in that second half was starting to find a bit of a rhythm. For this rushing attack, Nick, what do you need to hold them to? 200, 250 to make it a game? Because FSU, they're going to get their yardage, right? They're just that good at running the football. They didn't get the yards against Miami because that's an elite D line. But I think Pittsburgh can hang around in this one. 10.5, they'll cover, maybe even win the game.
Yeah, I like the 10.5 here. I think this is a good read. I think, continuing to go against Florida State is a smart play throughout the rest of the season if they're going to be lofty favorites in games, because I think this is a team that is really not that talented, and they're really struggling to kind of put the pieces together right now. And, we thought that this was a great team potentially, but we still had a lot of question marks after what happened last year. And I think the game against Alabama is continuing to just be more of a one-off, and more of a Alabama was just caught napping. They weren't ready to go down to Tallahassee, and Florida State was up for it. They had all offseason prepare, and they were able to really go out there and put a big mark on the board. Alabama is really flying themselves in a good position there. Picked up a nice win against Vanderbilt this past weekend, while Florida State slumped again, losing at Miami, and what was an opportunity for them to really bounce back and get themselves right here. I don't necessarily think Pitt's going to win this game, but I think Pitt's a very talented team that absolutely boat raced that BC team. They were only 6.5 point favorites when that line closed at home, and they were absolutely smoking them and really never looked back. They were up huge at halftime, 24-0, and just was really put themselves in a great position. They ended up going with the new quarterback, which I think is an okay move. He was really solid, 30 of 41 for 4 touchdowns and 323 yards, really solid. The Pitt rushing attack still needs a little bit of work, in my opinion. I think they haven't quite reached their full potential, 3.79 yards per attempt and 7 touchdowns on the season. But 41 points per game is really solid. 6.26 yards per play is really good. The fresh quarterback, young quarterback they inserted is really doing solid work. And I think this is an opportunity for them to be competitive here with Florida State and score some points, get involved and make this a contest. I like the over in this one as well at 57.5. But I think for this, we're just going to take the Pitt with the points. I think this is a team that's so talented and really in a good spot to compete with a Florida State team that's putting themselves in a tough spot. They're still a great offense, right? 46.8 points per game. They're giving up 20.8 points per game now, which is a little bit higher than I think you want to see, roughly the same number for Pitt. So I'm expecting some points in this one. That Florida State team, they can run the ball, right? 6.15 yards per attempt, 20 touchdowns, 1,400 yards total on the ground. Really impressive numbers. But if you can hold them to under 250, I think you can really make it a contest and be competitive. I think that's a magic number. Anything below 250, I think Pittsburgh has a really phenomenal chance to compete in this game and lose by potentially anywhere from 3 to 7 points, or maybe even be competitive and keep this as close as possible here. Yeah, it's tough going on the road at noon in Tallahassee. The weather will be still a little strong down there, but I think this Pitt team got a solid defense. They're not the worst run defense in the world right now. 1.72 yards per attempt on the ground is a great number. 5 touchdowns as well given up is pretty good. So I think they can stand up to this test, stop the run here. Obviously, their toughest test they're facing yet with this Florida State rushing attack. But I think they're in a good spot to stand up, hold them to, keep them at bay, keep the pressure on, keep this a close game, and cover that 10.5 points.
Does look like Des Reed will likely play in this contest as well, so that's great for Pitt. Moving to the next one, massive game on Friday night in Denton, Texas. North Texas and USF. The winner of this game is going to set themselves up alongside Memphis to play in the conference title game here in a couple of months for a trip to the playoffs. That's what it's kind of leading into at this moment. USF, of course, they started off the year on a pretty impressive run, beating Boise State and Florida before ultimately getting, dumped on by Miami. And the run game wasn't all that good to start the year. And I said when they enter conference play, it's really going to take over. And boy, did they ever in the opener against Charlotte. 407 yards and 3 touchdowns. They could not slow them down when it came to giving up the big plays. Byron Brown, of course, led the way with a career high 162. Had a very impressive touchdown as well in that one. This is the rushing attack. They'll likely be down Cartavius Norton, but Alvon Isaac, Sam Franklin, very capable running backs. Those guys also had pretty impressive games. This receiving group's making big plays. Chaz Nimrod, he had a couple of drops against Charlotte, but he's been a great downfield playmaker, as has Keyshawn Singleton throughout his career. So this is a nice USF offense. I think has tremendous balance, and now that they're in conference play, they're going to have a significant edge over most of their opponents. You look at North Texas off to a very impressive start, led by offense, but let's focus on their defense. The last 2 games against Army and South Alabama, they've not been great against the run. They've been allowing big plays galore. Army was down big in that game, and they fought back and forced overtime. 387 yards rushing for the Knights, and then South Alabama had 200 plus as well with offense. It's really not all that great for the Jags. This is a nice defense, though, at least at linebacker. Shane Witter, Trey Fields, these guys have been tremendous playmakers. Ethan Weslowski as well is a guy that has been leading the way in terms of negative plays at 6 tackles for loss. I think for USF, their defense is a little bit more polished than most group of 5 teams. I think their defensive line is respectable, but more importantly, they have veterans on the secondary and elite players in the middle in Jalen Schuler and Mac Harris. These guys are tremendous linebackers. They're going to lead the way for them. Deshaun Rucker, Taven Ward in the secondary. Slowing down Drew Mestamaker in this offense is certainly tough, right? Because it's a balanced attack for the Mean Green. Mackenzie McGill does a pretty good job with his efficiency in the backfield. Caleb Hawkins as a freshman has been phenomenal. 8 total touchdowns, over 100 yards per game, all purpose so far for him. And then back to that quarterback, Mestamaker, who I felt would be a star after how he played just one game. In the bowl game last year, he stepped up and was impressive. And so far, 250 per contest, 11 touchdowns, no picks. Breaking in a new receiving group as well, though. This one has points written all over, 66.5 the total. I think USF Moneyline's the best bet here, Nick. I think their balance is going to be a little bit more important, and I think their defense is capable of creating little stops. One thing I do want to say is Byron Brown, though, was very sporadic with his accuracy against Charlotte. They ended up having 4 turnovers in that game. Some of them were on him. Some of them were on guys fumbling. Their defense was also able to, oddly enough, force 4 of them as well, so it didn't hurt them altogether in the long run. But if they can protect the football a little bit more, Nick, I like their offense just a little bit more than North Texas is, and I know their defense is better.
The American is proving to be the premier Group of Five conference this year, and this is a premier matchup going down in prime time on Friday night. I love that this game's on Friday night. I think this is great scheduling. This is when you got to showcase your best matchups if you're a Group of Five conference, a smaller one, in my opinion. This is an opportunity to put your best teams out there on national television prime time. A phenomenal matchup going down Friday night. I think this is incredible. I cannot wait to watch this at 7:30 on ESPN2. A great matchup between two really talented teams in South Florida and North Texas. The Americans a very strong conference right now, and all these teams are being extremely competitive. I really liked South Florida in the preseason. I thought they were a team that could win the conference and be contenders to really fight atop among the top teams in the conference, which there were plenty of good teams in that conference in the preseason. I think the South Florida team has turned themselves into a really good unit, and a lot of it's because their defense has been a lot better than I think some people expected. There have been some weak moments, don't get me wrong, right? Giving up 26 points to Charlotte was probably not great. 49 to Miami was obviously not great, but the defense has been good outside of that, a lot better than people expected. 22.4 points per game is not bad. 3.71 yards per attempt on the ground. Pretty good numbers there, and 5.26 yards per play overall. Matt Harris has been phenomenal. Schuler, the linebacker, 46 total tackles for him. He has been a good leader. Those two linebackers are some of the best, one of the best 1-2 punches in the nation, certainly at that Group of Five level. They are phenomenal guys who are really solid there. They're good defensive linebackers that know the game very well. The coaching has been really good. Alex Golesh is a phenomenal coach who I think will have a great future at the top level in this sport, probably an SEC job in his future very soon. He is a phenomenal coach. It's getting the best out of his guys. But for me, really, the biggest question mark is Byron Brown. Can he be consistent? He was a little reckless against Charlotte. I didn't like what I saw there. He put the ball into harm's way. He's had some turnovers. If he's confident and comfortable in the pocket, this team can go very far, and they will find themselves in the college football playoff. He has been incredible on the ground for this team, and I think he's a really good guy that can really move his legs, get his legs involved. You got a scheme for that, and then he's been really solid as a passer. 1,200 yards passing, 10 touchdowns. Has been really solid on the season as well. I like what I've seen out of him. Yes, it's tough going on the road to a North Texas team that's 5-0 and quietly looking very strong, but there are some concerns with the run defense for me with this North Texas team. I'm a little concerned on it. 4 yards per attempt, 8 touchdowns given up on the season, 20 points total for this team. The secondary is really good. I like what they can do. 6 interceptions, only 4 passing touchdowns. So I think if USF's going to win this game, they're going to have to do it on the ground. I think they can certainly do so with the way that they have that good balance, 5.43 yards per attempt on the ground. There'll be a lot of points scored in this game. Obviously, the books think that putting it at 66 and a half. I get it, right? That it makes sense to have it really be that high because this is a matchup between teams that are going to absolutely score a lot. Mestamaker under center for North Texas is phenomenal. 1,200 yards passing, 11 touchdowns for him. He is really good. And then Miles Coleman, his receiver, is a really fun guy to watch there. The defense, I think, is just a little bit too weak for North Texas to win this game. So I think South Florida will get the job done in a shootout eventually. I think they'll be able to run the ball, chew some clock in that fourth quarter, and find themselves in a good position to knock out North Texas and put themselves in a good spot here. A great game Friday night. I like USF as well. I think that makes a ton of sense as the best bet on the money line. This is a very talented Bulls team with a big opportunity to get a huge win in conference play.
And I move to another one going down in Dallas. Red River is being renewed. My favorite rivalry in all of college football. These are always very exciting games, always a lot on the line. That's going to be even more so here on Saturday. Undefeated Oklahoma taking on a Texas team that could use a victory. This line's also sitting at 1.5, where Texas opened at 3.5, but John Mateer has been upgraded to questionable after surgery just 2 weeks ago. I don't think he's playing. This is all theater. If it's not, I'm not sure if it really makes him better anyways. I mean, this guy has a strong right hand, and it needs its bone to heal. And I'm not a doctor by any means. I don't think it's going to be 100% by any means. This offense without him, though, Nick, I think is going to be in trouble. Michael Hawkins at quarterback. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he has a new offensive coordinator this year, and he's still a young guy. But last year he was in the same situation. Couldn't make anything happen downfield as a passer with Anthony Hill at linebacker. There's too much athletic ability when it comes to QB spies. This defensive line is still great going up against a Sooner offensive front that is definitely improved, but it's not that polished of a group, and I just don't know what they're going to be able to accomplish without Mateer at quarterback. And if any Oklahoma fans run in here and talk about how they dropped 44 on Kent State, I don't know what to tell you because that doesn't prove anything one bit. I think this offense has significant problems when Mateer's not playing. He's an elite quarterback who uplifts everybody, but this run game, not that good. They're only able to stay ahead of the sticks because of Mateer's ability in the short areas, and he's just such a skilled runner, right? I think the receiving group's really having trouble finding consistently big plays. In Keontez Lewis, he might not play after an injury against Kent. So I think for Oklahoma, if Hawkins plays at quarterback, Nick, which all signs are saying he's going to, it's going to be a massive struggle. And I know the Texas defense did have some issues against Florida, but the Gators have been awful. And it was about time they played up to their potential, right? And after a bye week, that's what I figured would happen. That's why I picked Florida to beat Texas, and they did it quite easily. 457 yards allowed, give up some big pass plays. The offensive line for Florida is really good, though. Oklahoma does not have these capabilities, especially if Mateer is going to be on the sidelines, Nick. I know a lot of people have given Arch Manning a lot of hate. I understand he's not playing very good, but against Florida in the second half, he was making a lot of plays on the run. He was very elusive, was stayed confident. I know he made some bad plays as well, but he didn't give up. He didn't fold on the road one bit. Now there's a lot more pressure in this situation because we need a victory. He's been really good with his legs. The run game at some point needs to get back on track. I'm not sure if that's all going to happen here against Oklahoma, but all the matchups really favor in Texas's way. I think that Oklahoma's secondary is also pretty weak, and then again, I think with their D line and their linebackers is going to give hell to this offense with no Mateer, Nick. So I think Texas money line's the play. It's going to be a lower scoring defensive slugfest. Texas needs a win badly, Nick. You really think they're going to be sitting at 3 losses at this point in the season? I just don't see it. So Texas money line's the bet for me.
Yeah, I can't fathom Texas being at 3 losses right now in early October. I think Texas money line makes a ton of sense here. I'll talk about Mateer for a second. His doctor, Dr. Steven Shin, is considered one of the best, hand specialists in the nation, based out of LA, a hand and wrist a surgeon, one of the best specialists in the nation. But this surgery took place on, I believe, September 25th, 26th, something like that. At time of recording, this is October 8th, right? There's just not enough time passed, in my opinion, for him to be able to go out there and be able to really produce at a high level. It's like, I'm looking at 3 weeks, something like that. That's just not long enough, in my opinion, for him to come out there. I'm not a medical expert, but that just seems to be an absolute gamble. And I really don't think you make that decision if you're leading this team and you're Venables. I don't think you want to risk it and put him out there. I think I agree. It's pretty much smoke and mirrors here, trying to get in your opponent's head a little bit. So you have to scheme for 2 different options here, trying to play a little bit, of those games in a rivalry. I understand what they're doing. It makes sense, but I personally just can't see Mateer starting. And if he does, I'll be stunned that I don't know how effective he's going to be in a situation like that. Obviously, the books think he's going to be with the spread moving the way that it is, but at the end of the day, I don't think Mateer is going to play, and I think they are going to go with Hawkins, who did not look great against Kent State. I know they won 44-0, but the spread was plus 46.5, by the way, and Kent State was able to cover that. I do love those big dogs. If you're a longtime listener, you know that. Hawkins 14-24, 162 and 3 touchdowns. I know it's a bad team, but that's not really a stat line that's blowing me out of the water here. They were able to run the ball in that game, which I think was obviously what they wanted to do. They weren't really trying to do anything flashy against a bad Kent State team, but only 355 total yards of offense in that one. Just, not a super positive showing if you're looking at this. Mateer was playing like the Heisman favorite prior to the injury. I thought he was really playing great football and looked absolutely incredible compared to Arch Manning, who was not playing great football and does not look incredible. Texas Longhorns, they were at the top of the AP poll. At the start of the season, they have plummeted all the way out, being unranked in early October, which is crazy. It's been a big fall from grace, but you kind of expected Florida to win that game. I think that made a ton of sense because Florida, they needed a win. Napier always finds a way to coach like Nick Saban when his seat is absolutely scorching hot. He finds a way to get the job done. He gets a big win that he needed to get here. OU, they could afford to lose this game and it wouldn't absolutely cripple them at 5-0 right now. They certainly want to beat their rival, but I don't think it's the biggest concern in the world for them right now because they have a lot to play for. They have a lot of big teams left on the schedule. The defense has been phenomenal for Oklahoma, right? No, nothing short of phenomenal. 7.2 points per game is a really impressive number. 2.44 yards per attempt and 2 rushing touchdowns given up. Only 1 passing touchdown and 1 interception there. 3.5 yards per play. So I agree with your assessment. It'll probably be a lower scoring game. This Texas defense is not playing quite as advertised, but still really solid. 12 points per game on the season, 2.67 yards per attempt and 4.32. I think both teams will try to run the ball here, try to set the pace. I think Arch will certainly get his legs involved. I think it's going to be important for Arch to get his legs involved, kind of make sure that he's comfortable and confident there. I still believe in Arch. I still think this is a kid that's got a lot of opportunity to come back. I think he'll come back next year and really grow himself and get himself better as a quarterback. It's a little rough for him, but I think he's still got all the talent in the world to figure it out. I think he'll come out here and have a really solid day. I'm expecting a big bounce back from Arch, which will be a big difference maker. I expect him to have a solid day on the ground, north of 50 yards, I think, something like that on the ground, and really be productive for this team, get some touchdowns, and really put himself in the driver's seat. I think Texas can win this game like 24-17, something like that, maybe 20-14, something like that. Get the job done, win this game, and get a huge rivalry win over your opponent in a great venue in the Cotton Bowl. I'm very excited for this one, but I think Texas makes a ton of sense here, even if Mateer plays.
I mean, we just can't risk it. We play at South Carolina next week, which can be tough. It's not a great opponent, but the road environment, of course. Then we play 5 straight top 15 opponents. This is not the end-all, be-all, Nick, so it makes no sense to risk it. I would be very disappointed if Venables gives a green light for Mateer the player because you're risking throwing away your entire season. And for us, these are a lot of great matchups in the month of November for Oklahoma, so we hope he honestly doesn't play in this contest. They'll be all right regardless. Texas money line is the play, though. Moving another one here. Army and Charlotte. I alluded to USF running for 400 plus yards last week, and that was against this Charlotte team. Now you're going to turn around and face Army, who puts up 278 per contest with this triple option annoyance. That's certainly going to be interesting to see how much improvements you can make in a weekly basis. I'm not sure who the quarterback will be for Army. It's going to be either Dwayne Coleman or Cal Helms. I know that Coleman got in against North Texas and he was able to make a bit of a comeback. Both of these guys have been playing, but I think Cal is still going to be the starter. Noah Short is their top running back for Charlotte. This is a team that really also has struggled on offense. That's what it's going to come down to, right? Can their offense keep up to cover this three-score, difference? And potentially they can. I was at that Charlotte game, so obviously I have a lot more intel in this game than probably most people. Zach Wilkie came in for Charlotte in the second half. He was 14 of 18, played really well, led them to a couple of scoring drives. The run game, though, has just not been very effective for Charlotte. It's been very limited when it comes to efficiency. Army, they certainly don't have the best defense by any means, and they kind of got exposed against North Texas. But I think they're going to be able to eat away time of possession here. Their defense should make enough stops to come away with 3 scores. I just don't see how they don't cover in this one. That 17 and a hook might cause some issues. I'm still going to play it anyways, Nick. They should still win by 20-plus points. I can't see a world where they don't. I'll somehow probably end up being wrong, but this run defense is terrible for Charlotte, and they're going to give up a lot of explosives.
This is certainly an interesting look from you. I kind of like the play here. I think this makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to back up some of your opinions here with some of my stats. Last week, Army, they went down to Alabama and beat UAB in Birmingham 31-13. They pumped a bad UAB team. And that was a really good showing from that offense, putting 31 points on the board is pretty solid. That was their second highest points scored in a game this season. They lost to North Texas in overtime and scored 38 in that one in an absolute shootout. Army's been hot and cold all year, right? They lost an FCS team. They lost to ECU, but then they beat Kansas State. They were competitive with one of the best teams in the conference in North Texas at home, and then they ended up pumping UAB. So they've been hot and cold here. I think they're going to continue to blow hot, and they're going to stay warm in this one. Charlotte, they're not a good team, right? There's no way to sugarcoat it. 1-4, their only win against an FCS team, and they only won by 7 in a shootout against a bad FCS team. This is not a good Charlotte team, right? You worry about the hook, maybe, right? That's probably your biggest concern is maybe they find a way to backdoor, similar to how USF had to backdoor their way to covering that lofty spread last week on that weeknight game. But I think this is a Army team that's really in a good spot. I don't think it really matters who's going to play quarterback here. I think the script makes a ton of sense for them, right? Run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. And this is a Charlotte run defense that is absolutely abysmal. 4.38 yards per attempt on the ground for the troops. 13 touchdowns for them. Really good numbers there. I like what they're able to do on the ground. They're really solid. 25.2 points per game. And when you look at Charlotte, 5.15 yards per attempt given up on the ground, 9 touchdowns, over 1,000 yards. They're just getting pumped on the ground, 34.2 points per game. This is an opportunity for Army to really just run the ball over and over again. I think maybe another concern could potentially be that Army just kills a lot of clock and they have so many drives that are really long, and that puts them in spots that's tough. But maybe they'll get a turnover or two that will really swing this in the right direction. The defense has been solid this year. They've been able to force turnovers. They have 3 interceptions. I think they can find a way to force one here and put themselves in a good spot. I like what this Army team can do. I think this is still a talented roster, even if they had some disappointments early on. They're kind of getting shuffled out of the pack in a really strong conference, obviously, with some really talented teams at the top. They're still a really good roster that plays hard. They fight hard. They have great grit and they play the game a great way. I like what they can do with that triple option. It's just so tough to defend against. And I think a team that can't defend the run will find themselves upstream without a paddle right there on the Hudson River. They'll have a tough time. I like Army to win this game and look good doing it.
Now we're going to move to one of Nick's selections. Going back to Oregon State, he took them to not cover against Houston a few weeks ago, and they made it a game. They should have probably won that one. They ended up blowing it. Oregon State 6 at 0-7, plus 2.5 here against Wake Forest, who played very good against Georgia Tech a few weeks ago. They pushed them to overtime, narrowly won that one. The duo of Robbie Ashford, Damon Claiborne is certainly tough to defend in the backfield. Chris Barnes has been a nice emergence at wide receiver. This is a team that has been pretty respectable to start the year, but now they got to travel all the way out west to go against a team that's really not that bad despite their record. I know it's crazy to say because they don't have a single win, and it's almost mid-October at this point. But they've played a gauntlet of a schedule. Everyone they've played is probably going to make a bowl game up until this point. And their defense has been respectable against the weaker offenses. Houston and App State both had about 350 in that game total. The numbers are really inflated because they played Texas Tech and Oregon, 2 of the best offenses in the country. And then they played Fresno and Cal again, holding them to a 350 or less. So this defense, Nick, is playing pretty respectable ball against similar style of offenses when it comes to Wake Forest, at least in terms of talent. It's pretty similar. I don't like this pick at all. I hate to root against you, and if you play it, I'll certainly root for you to get it. But this offense still has talent. Anthony Hankerson's one of the better backs in the country. Malik Murphy, I know it's been a struggle, but he's been productive. And he's also got Trent Walker, who's one of the top receivers out west. So I think they're going to hang around and potentially win this one, 2.5. Interesting spread. I don't know if I like this pick one bit, Nick. I think Wake might run out of steam here going on the road all the way out to Oregon.
I actually like this pick a lot. I think I have a lot of decent reasons here. I'm going to start with the fact that I think Oregon State are just not a good team. 35 points per game given up. Yeah, I know they played some really tough teams, but still 35 points per game given up, 4.42 yards per attempt, 6.47 yards per play. I think Trent Bry, the head coach, is completely out of his depth. He went to Oregon State and he was their DC, so they elevated him when the head coach left and took a different job, John Smith, that is. But I think he's completely out of his depth and he is not ready to be a head coach. They make so many mental errors. They make special teams errors. They just are a poorly coached team, and I think he is on the hot seat. And certainly the only reason why he'll get a longer leash is because he is an alumnus of Oregon State. But I think they're in absolute trouble out there in Corvallis. I do not think they're in a good spot. As for Wake Forest, I think they're trending in the right direction. This is a team that's got some talent here. I think they're able to be competitive. They lost only by 1 point to Georgia Tech, a team that could certainly win the ACC. They were competitive and lost by 10 points to NC State. The Kennesaw State win was nasty during that week one, but they looked good against Virginia Tech. I know it was a closer score than probably some people hoped for, but I still think Robbie Ashford's a decent enough quarterback, and I think they have a really good backfield that is really dominant on the ground. I think they can really, really pump you on the ground. 4.4 yards per attempt, 12 touchdowns there. Really good numbers, 6 yards per play, 27 points per game. I think they're going to win this battle by just running the ball at a weak run defense that Oregon State has. I just don't know if Oregon State will be able to get the points and have the possessions to be competitive here. It's a low line, and heading out west, obviously anything like this is a little tricky, but I think this Wake Forest team's got a point to prove here, and I think they're in a really good spot to get a nice win. They could potentially make a bowl game if things shake out the right way for them. I like what they're doing under their first-year head coach. I think they're in a solid spot overall. And this is a team, I think they can just run the ball here. I like that matchup. That's a huge matchup advantage to me, is this Wake Forest rushing attack versus a bad run defense. I think that's the matchup you want to look for. The weather's supposed to be a little bit nasty out there in Corvallis, rainy, 55 degrees. Not great weather at all, so a sloppy game. Run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, chew the clock, put the possession in your hands, control the football, and really put yourself in a good spot. I love Wake to do that here and win this game and cover the 2.5. I think they're in a great spot. A very interesting game overall, a very interesting non-conference matchup. But give me Wake here. I like what this team can do.
Now we move to Nick's final selection. He's pretty crazy because he went down to the bottom of the well to find this one. Kent State hosting UMass. 2.5 point favorites are the Flashers. Nick is going to take the under 50.5, and I hate trying to pick these games because you have the worst ranked offense in the country, UMass, against the worst ranked defense in the country in Kent State. These are always beautiful matchups, right? Who's that typically favor? I don't know. One thing I do know is that UMass does have a really good running back in Rocco Griffin. Is he going to be able to rip off enough points to cover in this contest? I don't know. But I definitely know that Kent State, as the 134th ranked offense, probably aren't going to generate much either. UMass defense is 124th nationally as well, so slightly better, I guess. But these are just two terrible teams going at it. Kent State looking for their first win, I think, and it seems like forever. And then you have, of course, UMass. It's just here now in the MAC. So, it looks like Kent State beat Merrimack actually by a couple of points. So they do have a victory on the board. Interesting game, Nick. I don't know why you picked this. It's kind of funny. UMass has no wins this year, looking for their first. Interesting game. Is really worst on worst, and these can go either way, right? They could be 10-3 or 45-35. So you're bold for playing this if you end up doing it. So best bet, under 50.5. I think is interesting, but I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole.
Oh, I'm playing it. Let's get messy, baby. Let's have some fun here. This is an interesting slate, and I want to have a little bit of fun with a game between two teams that are both on double-digit losing streaks against FBS teams. That's right. Kent State has not beaten an FBS team, I believe, in 25 straight games. Their only win in their last 26 games would be against Merrimack, an FCS team, and UMass. They're equally as bad. They have not beaten an FBS team in a very long time. They're 0-5 to start this season, and they looked lifeless against a Western Michigan team that is not very good last week. Kent State, they got blown out by Florida State and OU, a very tough schedule for them. They got blown up by Texas Tech earlier in the season as well. This is bad on bad. These are two teams that are absolutely horrible, which is why I think this is just a fun play. UMass, 10.4 points per game, absolutely brutal. Kent State, 14.6 points per game, absolutely brutal. Yes, the defenses are bad, but these offenses can't generate anything. UMass, 4 interceptions, only 1 passing touchdown. Kent State, 6 passing touchdowns to 3 interceptions. I think Kent State ultimately wins the game, gets the job done. I think this is a team that's just a slightly more talented between two of the worst teams in the FBS level, but I think it's going to be a low scoring affair. I think it's going to be a game that's like, max like 24-10 between with UMass losing ultimately. I think this is just a Kent State opportunity to get a MAC win. UMass made the move to the MAC. They couldn't really be independent anymore, but UMass football is just a complete disaster and always has been. I understand why they made the move to the MAC. It certainly does benefit them long term, but the MAC's a brutal conference, and the Kent State and UMass are absolutely dragging this conference to the bottom here. This is a bit of a sicko play, but I wanted to have a little bit of fun on this episode here, and I just think this is an opportunity for these two teams to just absolutely bad. A punt bowl going down at Dick's Stadium in Kent, Ohio. There'll be a lot of punts this one. I'm going to play it. I certainly am going to play the under here. I think this is a fun opportunity to have a little fun on ESPN Plus. Obviously I won't be watching it because there'll be other games on during that time, but I'll keep an eye on it, check on what's going on here. I like the under in here between these two teams and what is an absolute brutal bad game at the bottom of the MAC.
That's me for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.